Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Chris with InsideTheU. Thanks for stopping by. I am here at Somerset Academy. Just got done watching the Battle of the Trenches event. Players from around the country were here. California Power won the event. A lot of California players, but players from all over the country were on this team. A really talented team. Impressive to watch all of these guys. Great competition with the offensive line going against the defensive line. Basically a point awarded for a one-on-one battle. So a lot of one-on-ones, a lot of teams. Florida teams were here as well. But just want to shout out to Torian Wilson and his group for putting this on at Crafting Linemen. It was great seeing Torian out here. If you follow the channel, I've talked to Torian. It's just kind of good hearing his instruction. At one point during the event, halfway through, just kind of reminded everybody to yes, it's a competitive battle out here, but don't go over the edge and essentially cost your team a penalty or get kicked out of a game. So I thought it was good instruction. Just kind of good hearing Torian handle some of the competition that I saw out here. And I know many of you like seeing the offensive line and defensive line going at it. I want to recommend everybody, if you haven't seen it yet, I had some spring practice video on the Hurricanes on the channel, so check that out. Speaking of the Hurricanes, good to see some guys out here. Francis Mauino was out here, had a ukulele at one point. Good to see him. Francisco, his brother, getting ready for Pro Day next week. Had a chance, I just talked with him briefly, but he was out here. He said at Pro Day, he's only really going to do bench press reps. He feels very comfortable and pleased with the times he has already put out there, but he's looking forward to Pro Day, and he's enjoying the process that all of this is. Also some young guys. Booker Pickett was here to see his younger brother, Cannon Pickett. You know, Micah Newton was out here talking with the team 24K out of Central Florida. He was here. And then also Max Buchanan showing off a new tattoo. So good seeing these guys out here, the Hurricane. Okay, so let's get back to the talent that I saw out here. And California Power won the event, had plenty of talent on both sides of the ball, offensive line and defensive line. And I want to start with offensive lineman Darius Gray. He really impressed me. I thought he was the best offensive lineman out here. Highly regarded guy out of Virginia, and just watching him, he won every single rep except for one right at the end as they were getting ready to win the title here. But he was great. Excellent footwork. You know, I had a chance to talk with him about it, you know, essentially what he feels are his biggest strengths. Because to me, look, great footwork, very elite in that sense, but also a good base. You know, he got into the right spots, and then players had a hard time really pushing through him. And also his hands. You know, for me, you know, when I'm watching it, his hands look great too. Asked him about that, and he said, you know, hands and hand placement, and just he can always get better at that, but certainly he knows he's got great footwork, and he's just one of those players that's, you can see why he's so highly regarded, highly ranked, and I think he's got to be a must get for a lot of teams. You know, just he's very talented, easy to talk to, but it doesn't take long. And I'm going to show you the clips. You can see it here right now. It does not take very long to watch him and see what stands out about him. I always like that about highly regarded players. It doesn't take long for some of these guys to really stand out, and he certainly did today. California Power also had some good offensive linemen in addition to Gray, you know, and guys out of Florida. Brett Colliget, a tackle there. He looked good at times. The size was there, so that was good to see. Also Cannon Pickett, you know, younger brother of Miami freshman Booker Pickett, and he was good too. You know, kind of good watching him go through the reps out of Tampa there. So guys from Florida playing on this California team, and they were impressive. And also a 2027 guy to watch out for, and that's Lex Mailing, you know, out of California. He showed some signs too. I thought the offensive line for California Power was really good. To me, the most impressive defensive player that I enjoyed watching the most out here was also on California Power. It's an Oregon commit. It's Tomohini Tupui. Just really impressive. It doesn't matter where he lined up at defensive tackle. He was great. You know, did a good job with his, you know, one-on-one moves, getting past the interior lineman, and also kind of just for fun, he'd move out to the outside and play at a little defensive end. But one of these guys that you could tell is really strong. And I asked him after one of the games about one of his moves. He had this move where he got the offensive player's arm up and just kind of used that against him, and just kind of like a bull rush and just powered through it. And I asked him about that, and he said that's something he likes to do, and basically he's using the opponent's momentum against him. And I thought that was a really clever way of describing it. And also he was really strong. Strong players are able to do that, but he's a highly impressive player. I enjoyed watching him. He was kind of a fun player to watch throughout the day, but highly talented as well. You know, one of these guys that certainly stands out. You can understand why Oregon, you know, wants him, why Miami's offered, and other teams are certainly after him. California Power featured other players who impressed. Another Oregon commit, 2026 defensive lineman, Viliami Moala. I thought he did a good job, as you can see here. Another guy too on the defensive line, out of California, Manoa Fapusa. I liked what he brought to the table throughout the event, and a 2028 to pay attention to out of California once again, Marcus Factal. I really liked his size and his athleticism, as you can see here, just did a really good job throughout the day. Other players stood out for other teams as well. Going back to the offensive side of the ball and the offensive line, 2 ACC commits from Florida. Guys that stood out to me, 2026 prospects playing for 24K. Let's start with Chancellor Barclay, headed to Clemson. He's committed to Clemson, had the Clemson gloves on today, playing interior line. I enjoyed watching him, and not just in the games, but watching him warm up. Seems like a leader type. You know, a guy that was instructing his players throughout the day, kind of helping them out. Even the guys that aren't as talented, he paid attention to them and trying to help them out. But a guy that kind of rallied the group and really did a good job talking. But again, interior guy, good strong base, footwork was good. I thought his hand placement was good. Didn't get beat very often at all. Just a very good day up for Chance there. I thought he looked great. Another guy, a guy that I watched in a high school state championship game for Orlando Jones, and that's Xavier Payne, a Florida State commit. He committed in December. I had a chance to talk with Xavier quite a bit, just kind of picking his brain, you know, as an offensive lineman, trying to find out more about how he sees the game. But also, I want to share a little bit about Dereon Coleman, a Miami commit. That's his teammate. That's his quarterback. I asked him what kind of stands out to him, what makes him special, what makes Dereon so good. And first he talked about his confidence, kind of like he borders this, he has a great balance of confidence but not being cocky. He said it's a little hard to explain, just like his arm talent. He was really impressed with his arm talent. He kind of provided a little bit of example, and he said at left tackle there, he feels the ball from Dereon kind of whizzing by him, and he can kind of hear it, but he said he never gets hit with the ball, and that's just an interesting perspective from Xavier as a tall offensive lineman. Did a great job today, did a great job with getting down, you know, kind of lowering to smaller defensive linemen. That was impressive. He didn't get bit very often. He did a great job of that, but you know, with Dereon, he just said, you know, he's got great arm talent. He has a great job, does a great job of bending it, so to speak, of kind of getting around the offensive lineman. Not a tall quarterback, but doesn't have a hard time getting around the offensive lineman and staying away from that. And I thought that was interesting, just kind of interesting to hear that perspective. And also too, I was kind of just interested about the team, Orlando Jones, you know, how they got to where they got. And he said they just kind of kept getting better. They knew they had a good team, but kept getting stronger throughout the year. For example, they didn't have anyone on their team benching over 300. He said by the end of the season, a lot of offensive linemen, a lot of defensive linemen benching over 300. So just kind of interesting to hear a little bit more perspective on Orlando Jones, Dereon Coleman, kind of what's going on there. And again, Xavier looked good, a big tall guy. He was the biggest lineman out here and did a good job, really competitive spirit, something you really like from an offensive lineman. Saw that throughout the day. And again, just kind of interesting talking with him throughout the day. Really enjoyed that. And also other players too. You know, there was, for example, I asked a defensive lineman, you know, he was going against an offensive lineman with really good length, but not a very big guy. And I asked him kind of what's the key when you go up against a guy that has great length but not a lot of weight, and he said he wants to use his strength to his advantage. He's not worried about the length of the offensive lineman, you know, getting his hands on him. He wants to go into him, kind of use his strength to his advantage. Those are little tidbits I like getting when coming to an event like this, asking people what they see, what they're working on, whether it's coaches or players, just kind of get that perspective. And it was great being able to be out here and be so close to the competition. That's why I think you guys will really enjoy the videos I'll be putting together, because of how close I was able to get, and hopefully you can see these players really go to work. A lot of reps for a lot of these guys. And just want to wrap this up, kind of getting through some names here, but also, you know, another guy that stood out for 24K, a defensive lineman, Kingston Shaw, an Illinois commit, a guy that did a good job at defensive end, rushing. You know, he did a good job of coming clean past the offensive lineman and getting to the cone. That's what they're doing. They're trying to get to the cone to get their point. He did great. You know, another guy, I want to wrap this up with a guy that many of you are already familiar with out of Southridge, an offensive lineman, Ryan Merritt. You know, it was good to see him. He's making that transition from wrestling, had a huge year in wrestling, and, you know, just 8 days ago he was wrestling, so he was good to be out here, kind of watch him go through it and compete, you know, as an interior lineman. I thought he did a good job. You know, he's a guy that's Miami, you know, certainly covets. Ryan's going to be at Miami on Tuesday, and he's planning on being back later on in the spring, but then he's got other visits coming up. He's going to be doing more 5-on-5 stuff, more offensive line work as he kind of transitions to football. Talking with his dad a little bit, he said it's a big transition, kind of going football to wrestling, whether it's technique or kind of vice versa. area, having to do with the stamina, and dealing with that. So a lot of transition with these guys going sport to sport. So certainly I think by the time we see Ryan in the spring, I think he's going to be definitely more adjusted to football out here. But overall, just great seeing him, great seeing all of these guys in action. Just a reminder though, they're not in full pads. I think many people kind of forget that when they watch these events, particularly with the offensive linemen and defensive linemen. They look obviously much bigger when they have their pads on, their shoulder pads and whatnot. But certainly these guys were big. I was standing next to them quite a bit, these guys, and they certainly got great size, great athleticism, really like the footwork, the technique. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, really impressed with the competitiveness out here. It's always great when guys are competing, not just being out here to be out here. They wanted to win their reps. A lot of cameras out here, a lot of people putting this stuff out there, so they know they got to perform, and certainly they did. So shout out to everybody that performed well. Shout out to Tori and Wilson once again. Glad to be out here. Stay tuned to the channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you do so you don't miss out on any of the action from this event, from these top level recruits. A lot of guys Miami certainly wants, and I think they're going to be in the picture for as this 2026 cycle continues to be at the forefront, particularly in spring ball. But thanks for watching. I'm going to get out of here. Appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and take care.
All right,